Have you ever contemplated the location of Jesus Christ's crucifixion? Golgotha, also known as Calvary, is a skull-shaped hill in ancient Jerusalem that was the location of Jesus' crucifixion. It is mentioned in all four Gospels: Matthew chapter 27 verse 33, Mark chapter 15 verse 22, Luke chapter 23 verse 33, and John chapter 19 verse 17. Golgotha is the Aramaic name of the location where Jesus was crucified outside of Old Jerusalem. In John chapter 19 verse 16 to 18, we read, "So they took Jesus, and he went out, bearing his own cross, to the place called the place of a skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. They crucified him there, along with two other men, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle." In Luke chapter 23 verse 33 of the King James Version, the word Calvary is used in reference to the same location. In modern translations, the more literal term, the place that is called the skull, is generally used. Calvary comes from the Latin phrase for this location, Calvaria locus. As Matthew recounts Jesus' crucifixion, he describes that they came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Matthew chapter 27 verse 33. Matthew does not directly address why Golgotha means place of the skull, but he does use the term Golgotha, which was the Aramaic name of a hill near Jerusalem where executions took place. Luke references the crucifixion site as the place called the skull, Luke chapter 23 verse 33, or more literally, the place called kreniori, the general Greek term for skull. What Matthew writes in Aramaic, Luke recounts in Greek, as both languages were widely spoken in Israel at the time. Luke, like Matthew, provides no direct explanation for why the location's name means place of the skull, but his use of the Greek kranion, along with Matthew's use of Golgotha, could be indicative of a location that resembled a skull and was named for its appearance, or the term could simply refer to a place of death, as it appears this was a common crucifixion site for criminals. John also mentions the location of Jesus' crucifixion, saying, "They took Jesus, therefore, and he went out, bearing his own cross, to the place called the place of a skull, which is called Golgotha in Hebrew. They crucified him there." John chapter 19 verse 17 to 18. It is worth noting that the term Calva was used in later Latin translations, translating the Greek and Aramaic terms for skull with the Latin equivalent, and the term Calvary has become a commonly identified name to refer to the location where Jesus was crucified. Both Golgotha and Calvary have entered popular Christian lexicon, though Golgotha appears to have been more widely used in the early church. According to early church fathers, the location was called the place of the skull due to the shape of the hill that apparently reminded people of a human skull. Christians are interested in the location of Golgotha because of the events that occurred there. One faithful day, Jesus carried a cross, assisted by a man named Simon, toward a hill where he was nailed through his wrists and feet and hung. He was one of 3 people sentenced to death that day, and he hung between 2 thieves. One of these 2 men recognized Jesus and requested that the Lord remember him in the kingdom. Jesus responded with a promise of glory soon to be revealed. "Truly, I say to you today, you will be with me in paradise." It's why Jesus was shedding his blood to forgive and redeem sinners who place their faith in him. Still today, this hill we call Golgotha or Calvary stands as a reminder of Jesus' great sacrifice, the only sacrifice capable of forgiving sin and reconciling man with God. Hebrews chapter 10 verse 12, Acts chapter 4 verse 12. Hebrews chapter 10 verse 12. "But this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down on the right hand of God." Hebrews chapter 10 verse 12, King James Version. But this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down on the right hand of God. Matthew chapter 27 verse 27 to 34. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews!" they said. They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. The crucifixion of Jesus. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink, mixed with gall, but after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When the soldiers leave Pilate's palace to crucify Jesus outside the city walls, they recognize that Jesus is so weak from the flogging that he will be unable to carry the cross. Simon, a pilgrim from Cyrene in North Africa, is enlisted by Roman soldiers to carry Jesus' crosspiece to Golgotha, the site of Jesus' execution. The current Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built in the 4th century by Emperor Constantine as a memorial to Jesus' crucifixion and burial, has long been thought to be this site. The soldiers, pretending to offer Jesus a cup of refreshment, offer him wine mixed with a bitter herb, a drink that could aggravate his parched thirst. Jesus refuses to drink the rest after tasting it. Matthew chapter 27 verse 35 to 36. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots, and sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Jesus is crucified, nailed to a cross, and executed in a painful, slow, and humiliating manner. Crucifixion victims typically died after 2 or 3 agonizing days of thirst, exhaustion, and exposure. The soldiers divide up Jesus' clothes and settle in to guard the execution, ensuring that none of Jesus' many followers attempt to save him. This scene's elements clearly fulfill Psalm 22. Psalm 22, verse 1. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me and from the words of my groaning? Matthew chapter 27, verse 37 to 44. Above his head they placed the written charge against him. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You, who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him, for he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. The soldiers place a written charge above Jesus' head that mocks his messianic claim. This serves as a deterrent to any Jews contemplating a revolt against Rome. Along with Jesus, they crucify 2 political dissidents. Pilate appeared to be rounding up, arresting, and convicting people who were inciting the crowds to revolt. People began to mock Jesus' claim of divine supernatural power after being convinced by the charges leveled against him. Psalm chapter 2, verse 7. All who see me laugh at me and mock me. They shout out the lip, they shake the head, saying. The highest levels of Israeli leadership have also accompanied Jesus to Golgotha to hurl their final insults at him. Even the rebels who were crucified alongside Jesus mock him for his ineffective messianic claim. Still today, this hill we call Golgotha or Calvary stands as a reminder of Jesus' great sacrifice, the only sacrifice capable of forgiving sin and reconciling man with God. Hebrews chapter 10 verse 12, Acts chapter 4 verse 12.